Joao Cancelo joined Bayern Munich on loan in January 2023 with an option to buy at the end of the season for €70 million. What were the financial implications for Manchester City, and how would this transaction be accounted for? Stay tuned as we look into this a little bit further. Cancelo was acquired by Manchester City in 2019 and extended his contract in 2022 to the end of the 2027 season. So Joao was not planning to leave, but circumstances on the pitch and playing time led to a fallout with Pep Guardiola and ultimately led to him leaving in the transfer window in January that's just passed. Cancelo was acquired by Manchester City from Juventus for a reported €65 million on a 6-year contract back in 2019. If he'd have stayed at the club and not renewed his contract, he would have been able to leave on a free transfer at the end of 2025. But in 2022, Cancelo renewed his contract with an extension to stay at the club until 2027. That would have made his time at Manchester City last for approximately 8 years. But given the circumstances and how he left the club on loan in 2023, how likely is it that he'll come back? Some would say very unlikely. But what are the financial implications for Manchester City? We don't know the ins and outs of the contract, but loans tend to be that a club agrees to pick up the player's wages. Let's say, for example, that could be Manchester City, and the other club could pay a fee in return. Since Manchester City have effectively loaned the player registration or the right for Cancelo to play for the club to Bayern Munich, this constitutes a lease under IFRS, since Bayern Munich have the right of use of the player registration. Manchester City, in this case, acts as the lessor and need to assess whether that lease is a finance lease or an operating lease. Given that Cancelo's contract runs until 2027 and he's only on loan until the end of the 23 season, the majority of the risks and rewards still sit with Manchester City, meaning it's likely they will account for the lease as an operating lease, since they retain the substantial risks and rewards of the player registration. And that means they'll continue to recognise the player registration as an intangible asset, and the amortisation charge will hit the P&L until the player leaves. And in this instance, when the player leaves, maybe when the option is triggered by Bayern Munich. Whether they'll pay €70 million or not is to be seen. They may come back to Manchester City and negotiate that value down. But let's assume that they do pay €70 million at the end of this season. What impact would that have on Manchester City financially? Before the option is executed, the amortisation charge, and let's assume the wages are still carried on the books of Manchester City. Any fee payable by Bayern Munich will end up being recorded as transfer income, likely to be disclosed as profit on sale of player registrations in the 2022-23 season. If the player registration is disposed of before the financial year end, being the end of June for Manchester City, then any profit on disposal would be accounted for in this season. If the option was not triggered until July, this would mean the profit would be accounted for in the following financial year for Manchester City. Given the reported acquisition price back in 2019 of €65 million or approximately £55 million, on a 6-year deal, coming towards the end of the 2023 season, Cancelo's net book value is likely to be around £20 to £23 million, depending on add-ons, agent fees, and obviously the renegotiation of his contract. We don't know the full amount that's being disclosed, and often when players renegotiate contracts, there is an additional agent fee to pay. Only club agent fees are capitalised, with player agent fees being an expense of the player. But at a €70 million or approximately £62 million option to buy, this would allow Manchester City to make a profit of approximately £40 million. Given that we are talking about an option and not an obligation on Bayern Munich to buy, Manchester City will not be able to recognise any profit until that option is triggered. But what else has changed this year when it comes to club finances? One new introduction is UEFA's squad cost ratio, which looks at the player's overall cost in relation to the income of the club. And given that Cancelo is still on the books of Manchester City, his amortisation charge and wages are likely to be taken into account in the squad cost ratio for 2023. Any income from the loan is likely to be recognised in transfer income in the denominator of the squad cost ratio. The denominator looks at the income, with the numerator looking at the expenses. The expenses include wages, amortisation and agent fees, with income being revenues and any other income from profit on disposal on player registrations or any transfer fees coming in relation to loans. Any losses or loan expenses going out will be netted off any incoming player registration fees. And this ratio of player costs broadly over income of the club needs to come in at 70% from 2025. In 2023, the year of introduction, the ratio sits at 90%. And this is assessed on a calendar year basis. So the clock started ticking from the 1st of January 2023 and will be assessed at the end of December this year. It's unlikely that clubs are going to breach this rule because the ratio for compliance is set quite high at 90%. But any clubs that go on a spending spree and have high amortization or wage costs or a reduction in revenue, or potentially are unable to realise the value of their existing squad in the form of profit on disposal, may suffer. This may lead to non-compliance for the squad cost ratio. So what's the penalty if clubs don't comply? A first offence is likely to lead to a financial penalty. Second and third offences are likely to come with a higher financial penalty, and there is always a threat of further sanctions in the form of sporting sanctions from UEFA's CFCB. But this would need a significant breach of the squad cost ratio to be well in excess of 90%. And given that we're in a transitional period with UEFA, it's unlikely that there will be such a severe punishment in the first year. So although clubs need to monitor the squad cost ratio, I don't think it's something that they need to be overly concerned about when it comes to being banned from UEFA competitions, for example. What do you think about Cancelo's move to Bayern Munich? Do you think he'll stay there? Do you think the option will be triggered? If so, there is a substantial financial benefit to Manchester City. And given the on-pitch success that the club has achieved over the past 4 years whilst Cancelo has been in the squad, I'd say that they got value for money, and I'm sure fans would agree. Many will be sad to see him leave, but that may be inevitable. We'll wait till the end of the season until we find out. If you want to learn more about football finance and how we share our experiences to give you a unique insight into the world of football, head to our website at www.footballfinancepro.com, where you can learn more about me, the founder of Football Finance Professionals, and sign up to our mailing list for regular updates from us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or other social media platforms for regular content updates as we keep pace with the fast-moving industry that is football, looking at what happens in the industry from a financial perspective. My name's Neil Wood and I'm a football finance professional. Follow us for more.